Today's guest is the author of a book called Ordinary Magic: Promises I Made My Mother Through Life, Illness, and a Very Long Walk. He describes it as a love story at the end of life that's currently being pitched as a limited series for television. But Cameron Powell has had so many life experiences that we don't even get to talk about his book. Instead, we talk about his 23 years spent at 12 different startups, and before that, his time working at the DOJ and a top law firm, straddling the lines of law, tech, entrepreneurship, and many other sectors. Cameron and I talk about DC's growth as an AI landscape, where the future of copyright and trademark statutes might go, and why it's more important than ever to have humans in the loop as AI systems get more and more arbitrary, affecting real people in Cameron's life. Let's get going. Welcome back to DC Decoded, where we break down what happens when artificial intelligence meets the nation's capital. I'm your host, Sam Lee. Today, we have Cameron Powell with us. Cameron is a writer, lawyer, technology entrepreneur, and leadership coach who writes and speaks on human-centered AI law, policy, and ethics. Following a Bachelor of Science in Business from the University of Colorado and a JD from Harvard Law School, Cameron mastered high-stakes federal litigation and intellectual property at the Department of Justice and a major law firm. He then embarked on a 23-year crash course in 12 tech startups as a CEO, CMO, GC, other roles, basically played nearly every position in building value. He's the author of several books, including Ordinary Magic: Promises I Made My Mother Through Life, Illness, and a Very Long Walk, a love story at the end of life currently being pitched as a limited series for television. Cameron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. Good to be here.
So 23 years, 12 startups, playing several different roles, wearing nearly every hat. After playing these many positions, what do you think is the most overrated and underrated quality that a startup leader could have?
Oh, gosh. Well, sometimes they're the same quality.
Depends, right?
One of the most talented people I ever met, his strength was his weakness. He could sell anybody anything, including selling something to himself that he didn't really believe. And once he believed it, you could sell anybody else. So, it's absolutely crucial that you believe in what you're doing. And there's this tension because you can believe too much and you're not coachable, you're not flexible, you don't have the sort of scientific mindset to look at the evidence. We used to joke with one co-founder. We called him One Data Point Mike, and I've changed his name because he would see a data point and he would draw the line the way he wanted to. It goes this way or whatever way is on the screen, but one data point. And that's the kind of motivated reasoning or confirmation bias that we have to be careful of. At the same time, we have to believe in what we're doing.
Right. So for those people where their strength is their weakness, how do you coach that? Because that seems to be harder than if there's a defined strength or weakness. So how do you coach someone like that?
Yeah, I think that's often the case. If you look at any strength, it holds its weakness inside of it because the weakness is simply using it to excess or in the wrong context. For example, if you take the StrengthsFinder assessment, they've got strengths like achiever. Yep. Achiever sounds great. Like, how could that be a weakness? Maybe it could make it hard for me to know when to quit, or maybe I yell at my kid when he misses a T-ball, right? Like there's a weakness side of all of these. Analytical. We already have the term analysis paralysis. The weakness is inside of the strength. But so I think that to answer your question, it's really about awareness. It's really important for people to understand. It's the same with me. I'm really good at crafting a story. Pulling together evidence, marshaling information, giving a compelling narrative, and then I keep working it and working it and working it and polishing it, and I don't know when to let go. And so my strength is tipped over into weakness because it's excessive or out of context.
Right. And before all of that, you worked at the DOJ and a top law firm before transitioning to these startups. So how did that evolution from this high stakes litigation to entrepreneurship shape your perspective on, I think, what are often these buzzwords of risk and innovation? Like, what does risk and innovation actually mean given all the different experiences you've had up to this point?
Yeah, there are different kinds of risk. When you're practicing in federal court, your main concerns are screwing up something so it harms a client. And it's usually just, if it's for the government, the client could be all of the United States.
Right.
Or being yelled at by a judge. And, when you're pitching to a VC, you're still pitching what I call an evidence-based story. And the stakes are still high, but it's not as stark in some ways. The reputational damage maybe comes later. You're not going to be sort of, unless you're on Shark Tank, called out and made fun of or sanctioned or whatever. So personal risk feels a little different. Idea risk, I think, is where entrepreneurs really they go a bit further, right? They're trying to come up with ideas. Is there product market fit for this? This is my hypothesis. Is it crazy? Am I going to be made fun of? And honestly, I think that's why entrepreneurs have some of the highest rates of anxiety and depression, is because they're constantly proceeding into uncertainty. Is this going to work out? Am I going to be poor? Am I going to be ridiculed? Will I fall on my face? Am I going to misspend other people's money? Like, there are just so many things they're worrying about, because unlike in an established business, Steve Blank, who sort of gave rise to the lean startup methodology, right. He defines a startup as a temporary business model temporary business in search of its business model. If you're working for an established company, you already know that what they sell is wanted by somebody. So it's removed a huge amount of the risk of your hypothesis. Well, I think this product is wanted by these people. Let's see if there's product market fit or not. And that search for product market fit is a tightrope, and it may just lead to a fall into the bottom of the canyon at the end. If you're with an established concern, you have to keep innovating, but people generally want what you're selling.
Right. So it's safer in that way. But I would say on the other hand, like, you could be potentially introducing something quite disruptive. And I think every entrepreneur's dream is something quite helpful that nobody else is doing. Right. So yeah, definitely that balance. Let's shift to talking about DC. DC isn't traditionally known as a tech hub like Silicon Valley, but I've realized more and more that it has unique strengths of being this weird conglomeration of federal agencies, a growing number of mission-driven startups, policy think tanks, and AI in particular is just becoming more and more embedded in every sector, not just the startup sector or business sector. Many guests on this show have articulated ways that DC can even become a leader in the tech space in the country. So from your perspective, where can DC businesses be focusing their energy when it comes to implementing AI, so we could try to make the region more of a tech leader, as a lot of my guests think DC could be on its way to becoming?
Well, I think the tip of the spear is still selling to the federal government, right? I mean, it's with the possible exception of China, the world's largest customer. I think it's one of two reasons that DC could be at least a twin hub for AI. The other being we have approximately as much talent and about as many job openings as the Bay Area, which I just learned like a year and a half or so ago, that DC and San Francisco and the Bay Area are sort of 1 and 2 on those two metrics of the AI talent and the job openings. So there's clearly a lot of activity here. I think a lot of it is selling to the government. We've got a few accelerators like CivStart that are specifically focused on GovTech or CivTech. But then you want to build things that have broader application, like you go to the government as your first vertical. Okay, now turn to financial institutions or insurance companies or retail or whatever. But I think that's often going to be the opportunity, is facilitating what the government does or what government contractors do with the government.
Right. What do you think has led to this surge of AI talent and job openings? Is this something that has happened quite recently in DC, or do you think it's been growing for a long time and it's just now catching, from my perspective, more traction and just more awareness in general?
Yeah, I don't know if I could locate a particular event that would have been a disruptive change in the rate of people coming to DC for that. I mean, sure. I think it's, you've got a metropolitan statistical area of 6+ million people. You've got a lot of universities, at least as many as the Bay Area. A lot of people, I think the agencies in particular and all the contractors, there's a lot of data. This is part of why Doge is so eager to get its hands on our data, is there's just so much of it. So I think a lot of people came here maybe in AI adjacent areas, conventional AI like machine learning, what we used to call applied statistics, or even back in the old days, predictive analytics or
Sure.
big data. All those precursor terms that we use AI now to sort of pretend it's different and we're more cutting edge because we're AI and we're not big data. But a lot of that was already going on here just because that's the way that all the agencies had to try to manage their information. And so you had a lot of people primed with just the right skills. The only thing they were lacking was waiting for Gen AI to show up and bring everybody's attention to AI for many people for the first time.
Right. That makes sense. I think DC is definitely, it's only gotten more important. I think the conversations and the moves people are making in the AI space as all of these, not necessarily new developments, but these rapid developments are hitting people who, like you said, may not have been as deeply embedded in the AI field, like maybe before early 2020s, late 2000, the teens of the 2000s. So you mentioned the federal government being the number one customer. You mentioned Doge. How should DC companies in general be thinking about this current administration? Because I feel like it's something that is on everyone's minds and in DC, and you can take it any which way, but I feel like the federal government clearly changes a lot with each administration change. So how has this latest administration change affected AI's progress specifically in the region?
Well, I think for a short-term mentality, it is probably going to speed up development of AI technology very quickly. Because AI can't really be divorced from its ethics and its human impacts,
Right.
it could actually slow down development as it relates to how do we make this work for people. You know, and this is partly, I think, we have a tax code that has a lower income tax rate on income that comes from capital as opposed to labor. So this is one of many reasons that a business owner says, "Let me get rid of my labor. Let me try to automate everything." So there can be this rush to automate when that's not necessarily the only option. You could have what's called complementarity, where you build AI systems that augment humans, that don't try to replace them, but that realize that, I mean, you can look at the example of chess, for example. In the chess world, AI plus human teams are better than humans alone and AI alone. There's something about the combination that makes them better. And it's similar to the idea of diversity of thought and experience. You know, when you have a team of 5 people from very different backgrounds and experiences, they're going to perform better. Their companies are going to perform better. If they're an executive team or a board, they're more profitable. I mean, this is the value of so-called diversity. It's diversity of the way you think. It's diversity of what experiences you've been through. And AI is nowhere close to replacing everything a human can bring. But if we define a job as simply what AI can automate, we can trick ourselves into thinking AI could come in and take this job.
Right.
Well, the first thing we're missing is, well, who's managing the AI? Because every worker or every thing that does a job still has to be managed. It still has to be supervised. In this case, it has to be fact-checked. It has to be kept in guardrails and make sure it's adhering to ethics, that the data is unbiased and so forth. So I think, you know, there's a danger in trying to bake humans out of the equation and then immediately having to talk about universal basic income as the only solution. I mean, you know,
Right.
humans have an inherent genius, and AI is not going to replace the ability for their motivation, their a certain spark of creativity. It's a great compliment, but I think we get into really dangerous territory when we start talking about a wholesale displacement of human genius.
Well, on the topic of technological development, we have talked about AI agents very briefly, or agentic AI, and you mentioned that it has the potential to disrupt entire industries. So first, can you define agentic AI for people who might not know what AI agents are?
Well, and I think in the most fundamental definition is simply that the agent can go off independently and perform somewhat more complex tasks than the ChatGPT would. ChatGPT will look things up. It'll calculate some things. It'll give you a table. It'll give you code. It'll give you a PowerPoint. But it's not going to systematically organize your 5-city business trip and book your hotel rooms and make sure that they're close enough to the conference center and optimize the distance to meetings you have to go on and all those sorts of things. It's not going to sort of ChatGPT is not going to give you the whole website and write the copy and create a marketing funnel and all that. So the agents can do more, and this makes them the sorcerer's apprentice, right? There's a lot more trouble they can get into, and people need to understand that there's a long body of law, principal agent law, an agency law that makes the principal, that is you who set loose the agent, liable for what it does. So it's going to bring up, we don't actually need necessarily, we already have regulation in AI. It doesn't say we're regulating AI on the regulation. It's the law of negligence, right? It's contract law. It's the law of agency. So there are going to be some stopgaps that we have in the law, even without Congress lifting a finger, simply because we have principles in the law that still apply, just as they apply to social media in most respects.
Right. And I think as AI systems and AI agents being an example, as they become more capable and inevitably widely adopted, I think they are running headfirst into existing legal frameworks. The first episode that we had a lawyer talk about different frameworks that are currently trying to be used as guardrails, such as the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. The European Union has a bunch of frameworks that some US companies try to adhere to. And I think in DC especially, where policy and law are quite central, understanding those intersections of technology, innovation, and frameworks is critical for both businesses and policymakers alike. And I think one such intersection is the question of intellectual property as AI becomes a bit more proactive in how it goes about things. So how do you think the DC tech community should be thinking about things like authorship and copyright in the age of AI and then generative AI as well?
Well, at least in the short term, until we amend the IP statutes for patents, copyrights, trademarks, they want to think about it in the same ways that the statutes do, which is to say, both the Copyright Act and the patent laws require a human to be involved to create the copyright, to invent the patentable idea. Those laws speak in terms of an author and an inventor, and courts have already held that means a human. It's similar in other countries. Now, the trademark law is actually a little different. Trademark law doesn't care who created your logo. It doesn't care who came up with your nifty phrase. It just says it needs to be used in interstate commerce as a unique identifier for goods or services. So you could have AI create your logo, and assuming it's not borrowed too many elements from other people's logos and doing that infringe somebody, you can say you have ownership. But the authorship and inventorship in patents and copyrights, it's important that we understand how that works, because at the same time, you have a lot of companies that are sticking their heads in the sand and saying, we don't want employees using AI. Now, that's unfortunate. It's like telling teenagers they can't date. At no time in history has that worked. Don't do it. Trouble will ensue. Hilarity might not ensue. And what happens is you tell them not to do it. They take it underground. They do it out of sight. They then don't know what they don't know, and they get in trouble. In the employee context, that means you tell them you can't use ChatGPT. Well, they need to produce a white paper. They need to produce a report. They need to produce a logo or a blog post. And you've told them they can't use ChatGPT. So when they produce it, they hand you their draft and they say, here it is. And you say, oh, this is reasonably well done. Thank you. It was very quick too. What a surprise. Unfortunately, if that employee doesn't know how copyright law works, and they don't know how to be an editor and a proof checker and a copy editor and a reviser of prose, an editor, then they're going to not make many changes, and they're going to hand the employer something that, because it's a draft from ChatGPT and they're not the author of it, the employer now has no copyright in any of that. So if employers want to have copyright in what their employees and their contractors produce, they need to say, look, we assume you're going to probably use LLMs, large language models, at some point to help you. That's fine, but we want you to show us your first draft, and we want you to show us your final draft. In fact, if you could do a red line that compares the two, that would be ideal, because we only get to own the copyright essentially in the red line. What did the human add? That's where you might have copyright. And ChatGPT is a great tool. I mean, it's so hard to get things off the written page. I mean, it's genius to have something that goes out, it fetches ideas, it pulls them together. I have training as a writer and an editor. I edit things to unreasonably over and over again. And my final draft looks very little like the original, but that's because that's what I've been doing since I got out of law school. A lot of people don't have that experience and ethic of crafting, revising. Let me look into this. Let me change that. Let me move this around. Oh, it's a different emphasis now. Let me change the language, new heading. And frankly, there's 3 reasons I tell people that they should edit what LLMs do. One is for the intellectual property rights. One is because I think that's what readers want to read, is the product of sustained thought, right? The novelist Don DeLillo once said that, he said, I don't even know what I think until I start writing about it. He said, writing is a concentrated form of thinking. So I want to read stuff that someone has ideally taken time with, days, weeks even. They had a shower epiphany. They had ideas on a walk. They talked to somebody. They did some more research. They read this book. This was a surprising source. Reading this article, got another idea. And that's where all the creative links happen. And then, of course, as you write in your own voice, you can have a distinctive voice, whereas Gen AI is either going to copy somebody else's voice or it's going to be a bunch of averages, what I call genera voice. And if you want to know what genera voice looks like when it's written by a human, read any cover letter. It's trying to be as inoffensive and vanilla as possible. So that's the second reason you should be an editor with Gen AI, is that's really what we want to read. And if you want to have any sort of personal brand or personal voice, you need to develop that. The third reason is there's already evidence that our overuse of LLMs is atrophying our critical thinking skills. Microsoft Labs just came out with a study, and it wasn't even the first, that the extent to which people trust LLMs too much, they don't really critically think about what they're getting. They tend to just use it because it looks great and it's stated with bravura confidence.
Right.
And they've actually started to atrophy some of their critical thinking skills, which, guess what, could make us the earliest generation in history to develop dementia. I mean, you can't just stop thinking and outsource it all. There's going to be consequences, just as there are consequences in using social media. We're all more addicted to certain kinds of endorphins. We have zero attention span. Like, it has changed our brains. It's going to change our evolution. AI is going to do that too. And I think people need to be very careful in how they use it, because they may experience consequences later in life, if not just even later on in their career, because of an over-reliance.
Right.
I say collaborate, don't abdicate with AI.
Agreed. I noticed at the beginning of your response, you said before we amend these statutes related to IP, trademarks, and the like. So first, who's we in this scenario, and what do those amendments look like as AI progresses?
Yeah, well, I think, we the people, because our representatives
our democracy.
But we know who's going to be pressing them to vote for it. It's going to be the same people like Disney that repeatedly asked for an extension on the life of copyrights.
Yeah.
Right. And copyrights used to have a much shorter registration period, and Disney kept saying, "Couldn't you make it a little bit longer so we can make money longer, so somebody can do Mickey Mouse for another 20 years?"
Yeah.
And so you're going to find large creators of IP, corporations, maybe even the LLM vendors themselves, like ChatGPT and Claude and Anthropic. They're probably going to start pressing for more copyrightability of things that I prompt. Now, interestingly, your prompt, if it's sufficiently long and detailed, is copyrightable. So someone might be able to infringe your output, but they can't infringe your input. Now, the copyright law doesn't need to protect that. It's already potentially protected, and it's a corner case. I don't see many prompts getting stolen. And frankly, even if it did, it's not going to produce the same result. We know that in many cases. But, you're going to start to see some pressure to allow at least the results of a collaboration with a little bit of a loosening of how much human author needs to be involved. And that's going to be true for patents as well. We've already had some inventors. Stefan Thaler, has brought a case in the copyright office and the patent office, and I've met him and talked to him about it. He has an AI that he claims is sentient, and he says it invents on its own. That he just comes back in the morning and he turns it on and it's invented something. And I said, well, why don't you just take credit for it? Why don't you just say you did it? You built it. He said, well, because it wouldn't be honest and so forth. But there's going to be some pressure that we see because companies will want protection, and they're going to say, look, I mean, our guys prompted this. We curated it, whether to use it or not. There should be some protectability for it. And that could cheapen human authorship. So I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing for human authors.
Right. On that topic of what's best for humanity, I think your last point about critical thinking potentially being atrophied by over-reliance on AI, that's something that I think groups like the Gen AI Collective are trying to fight back against. Obviously in a large scale way, but for the DC chapter, it's as simple as that AI soiree we were at a few weeks ago, which is relatively small, but just trying to better understand how everybody in that room was using AI. So I'm curious, based on your experience being in the DC tech community, whether that's at a Gen AI Collective event or not, like, how do you see people in the AI space grappling with something like that? Like critical thinking being on the decline for especially like younger generations. Like, what are people doing to address that from what you've seen?
I don't know. I think there are people who, and this, I guess, depends on whether you're a Gen AI digital native, right? If you came up and you were in high school or college recently, if you didn't have a long tradition behind you of editing what you see, of going through a process and having a pride of authorship, if you're just happy to take something that was generated by a machine and claim it as your own, then you're not going to be as concerned. Even if you're sort of encouraged to add your own take, right? Your own version of whatever you've been using. So I think it's like with social media. I mean, we know that it's probably harming our brains and our relationships, and it's too shiny and too addictive, and we're not doing much about it. And some people do, right? I mean, I have a timer on my phone that tries to limit Instagram, Facebook, stuff like that.
Do you stick to it? Do you stick to your timer?
Pretty well. In fact, I have two of them. There's Apple's native timer, and then there's another app. And between the two of them, they've kind of got me straitjacketed. And I rarely press ignore limit. But I think it's that kind of discipline. I mean, studies have shown, and you can tell people this and it won't change their behavior. Like I'm sitting here in spite of the study I'm about to tell you about, my phone's sitting right here. But even having a phone in the same room as us makes us more distractible and less focused. Just in the same room, just the fact that we know it's there consciously, subconsciously, that it could send a notification, that it's there, it's sort of calling me for my next break to pick it up. We don't have the same opportunities for deep thinking, deep reading, close reading that we used to. I mean, it used to be you're waiting in line at the grocery store, at a stoplight. Boredom had some utility because ideas would come in your head and you start to make those free associations, right? That where creativity comes from. Different domains of thought and experience float around and they bump into each other. Like Steve Jobs, loved computers, took a calligraphy class, fonts for years. Only the Mac really offered fonts options. And so those serendipitous moments of creativity and epiphanies, we're eliminating them because when I pull up to the stoplight, I'm grabbing my phone. When I'm standing in line, I can't stand to be bored. I'd rather have some endorphin rushes. Let me check Apple News and read the horrifying headlines. I think people who really seriously want to do creative work have to really guard their brains jealously.
Right.
Absolutely.
You talk about that as almost like a bygone era, like the boredom aspects or letting things come together in that natural way. But Do you feel like that's something that could make a reappearance or is making a reappearance in small pockets? Because I feel like that conversation topic comes up a lot with me and my friends. And I feel like the consensus is always like, okay, like let's take more time to do stuff like that. So I still feel like enough people are aware of it, but I think an overall trend could be identified of it being like on the decline, especially with, like you said, the accessibility of the technology.
Yeah, I think there are pockets of resistance. There are people who've maybe realized its effect on them or who've read the research. And it's like deciding to stop, drinking high fructose corn syrup or something. I mean, there's going to be some people who are on the vanguard of saying, no, let's just stop this right here. And it's going to be a lot about convenience, right? I mean, it's a similar choice we had in should I shop at a Walmart, even though they destroy downtowns? Should I shop at an Amazon, even though they destroy downtowns and small businesses, right? But, it's so convenient. They already have my credit card and it's overnight shipping. And I don't need the thing overnight, but there's that kind of addiction to it, and so we have shown that we don't always make the decision that's best for us or society. We can tend toward laziness.
Well, I think one response to all of this convenience of technology as it continues to evolve and be innovative has been content moderation, whether that's by the government or just by tech companies themselves. And this is a slightly older example, but back in 2020, The Verge reported that YouTube had implemented primarily AI systems for content moderation. And then between the span of April 2020 and June 2020, so this 2 months, there were about 11 million videos removed from YouTube through this primarily AI system, or almost about doubled the usual rate. And then around 320,000 of those takedowns of the 11 million videos were appealed, and then half of the appealed videos were reinstated. Even though that was back in 2020, it was a sign that the AI systems were clearly overzealous in their attempts to spot harmful content. And generally, I think proponents of the anti-content moderation side say that content moderators tend to be overzealous. So obviously, DC is a place where a lot of that policy and business reactions occurs. So when you look at a company like YouTube's approach to AI moderation, what do you think stands out to you in terms of where the legal and ethical frameworks held up or broke down in that case?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting and timely question. So what's really interesting is that every social media platform, other than YouTube, regardless of how much they say they're in favor of free speech, allows themselves in their contract with you the right to terminate your account and for you to even never have a right to create another account. Yeah. For a good reason, a bad reason, or no reason at all. Completely arbitrary. You said something negative about the CEO on Twitter. They don't like your race or your marital status. It doesn't matter. They can terminate your account. So I believe in 2019, YouTube said, that's a really terrible policy for attracting creators and saying, come and make your business here. We're going to give you some certainty. Right? This is what developed nations do. They have a regime of laws that give businesses certainty that contracts will be enforced, that courts operate, that justice is reasonably swift and accurate, that there's due process. This makes business possible, makes living possible. And so YouTube said, you know what? We're going to go above and beyond all these other platforms. We're going to change our contract, which used to say we can terminate you in our sole discretion. And now it says we will only terminate you if we have a reasonable belief that you have violated the terms and conditions. And not only that, but we'll give you a reason. So in other words, they're describing due process. They're going to give you a reason why they have terminated, and there's a process. They don't terminate immediately. It's got to be, they said, we'll only terminate in instances of severe or repeated abuse.
Right.
And so the creators that are attracted to that because it's something you can build a house on. There's a foundation there. What we're seeing though is that the use of AI, and there's other automated technologies. I wouldn't say it's all what we call AI, but AI and automated technologies are still misunderstanding people's videos. Yeah. Now, first of all, I'm working on a case now where we have located unfathomable number of absolutely pornographic videos on YouTube that have been there for years and amassed hundreds of thousands, millions of likes, and lead straight to places like YouPorn. They're on YouTube. So they may be overzealous, except when they're underzealous.
Sure.
But, I have a law school classmate. He's got 254 patents. He applied for them, almost all of them himself. He's just a polymath. He's just the brightest guy, just the most creative mind. Talk about generating ideas. Late last summer, his wife is very ill. He's a caregiver. He's looking for solace, for purpose. He says, you know what? I'm going to start a YouTube channel and teach people about innovation. And so he talks about innovation and creativity and mindset and anxiety and depression and imposter syndrome and how to market and he's promoting this, and he's paying YouTube to promote his videos largely to people in developing nations. He wants to empower them to innovate and even to sell back into developed nations. And so he's produced dozens of videos like this, all very earnest. He's like a professor. And then he decides to do a series on what he called unexpected drivers of innovation. Pandemics, wars, things that you don't really associate with innovation necessarily. And one of them is the human drive to procreate, human sexuality. And he decides to do a video where he explains how the adult industry really pioneered compression, right? Payment processing, right? A number of sort of features. And so he's just giving this professorial discussion, and he puts it up on a test channel, which has 2 subscribers, not even his main channel, because he always put things there to test them. Quickly thereafter, he gets what appears to be an automated message saying, well, this seems somewhat problematic. We're going to age restrict this. And there's an appeal button. So he hits appeal. A couple hours later, it comes back and says, oh, yeah, we've changed our minds. It's fine. So he takes the same video. He strips out even more content that could even potentially be an issue with anybody. He puts that on his Innovation Cafe channel. System comes through, age restricts it. He appeals that. It just goes around and round. And what becomes apparent is that the AI doesn't know the difference between pornography and a lecture on an industry. And it treats them as one and the same. And it also makes contradictory judgments. It says it's age restricted. Oh, now it's fine. And then he put it up on a different channel. It's age restricted, and now it's fine. But he had to appeal that. And only because he had so many followers, at this point over 200,000, which he'd amassed in 4 months. Only because he had so many followers was he able to get a human at YouTube and say, could you look at this and just tell me, am I going to be banned if I post this thing? Because I no longer trust your AI, what I assume is your AI. And the human looks at it and says, no, it's fine. It's fine. Well, guess what? The AI overrode the human.
Wow.
Didn't allow itself to be trained on the human, did not get steered by the human, overrode it. He gets he pulls the videos down. He doesn't trust even the humans, what the human told him. Pulls all the videos off. Then he gets a message saying, you have been banned from YouTube forever. So it's just the definition of arbitrary. Now, so what makes this interesting is, like, what's the legal hook here? Well, for one, we're going to say, YouTube didn't give a reason. Its reasons were contradictory and therefore not reasonable. It ignored the human, things like that. But what I think is interesting from an AI perspective, we're going after that terminology in the contract that says they have to have a reasonable belief. We maintain that automated technologies don't have beliefs. And in true lawyer style, what you do is you look up the etymology of the word belief, and it has words like emotion in it. Oops. We don't think that the AI can have a belief. It also has to be a reasonable belief. Setting aside whether AI can reason a bit, we don't think it knows what's reasonable, because again, that's about context and culture and so many things. And third, even if your automated technology could hold a reasonable belief, we're saying a legal entity like Google or YouTube can't outsource its belief holding to an algorithm. So we've been preparing a case to test this, and there are a lot of creators though who've perked up as they've heard about it, because there are a lot of people who think they've been unjustly deplatformed. Now, some of them as always happens. Some of them are probably wrong. They probably deserved it,
Right.
at least within Google's terms and conditions.
Sure.
But I think if my friend is any indication, it's making some arbitrary decisions.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are a lot of statutes like consider healthcare. United Healthcare, before Mangione shot its CEO, had already litigated some cases brought against it because the relevant portion of the statute said it couldn't make arbitrary and capricious decisions. And the plaintiffs had said, it looks like you used AI and it made silly mistakes. And that's the definition of arbitrary and capricious. We don't need external AI regulation. Courts can apply arbitrary and capricious in this context. So that's why I say that a lot of regulation of AI is going to come from existing statutes. The law of negligence, which says you had a duty of care to me, you performed a task, you breached your duty of care by being negligent and not doing it up to the standard of the sort of reasonable in the field, and I was harmed as a result. And then there's the law of contract, which is where we're going with Google. With Google/YouTube, there's actually one other aspect of the claim, and that is this: unfair competition. Because they made a bit of noise about saying, look, we're different. We won't deplatform you for an arbitrary reason. And if you then make that promise illusory by being arbitrary, there's a potential unfair competition claim as well. So those are just some of the ways that you can try to rein in a misuse of technology.
Right, which is very important if that has not been made clear. Just to wrap up, I think as AI continues to progress, I mean, even with that case, it really makes you think about who you are as a human and how you continue to distinguish yourself from technology. So for you, Cameron, you've had many titles so far in your life, but I noticed that when you gave me your bio, you chose to put writer first. So why put writer first? Why is that the one that either intuitively or, I mean, knowing what you've told me through this episode, you probably revised that bio many times, but why put writer first? Why is that the first one that you want people to think?
I think it's central to all of the others, all the other things that I do. And I don't restrict it to sort of just writing a Word document. I mean, it's really communication. The same batch of skills go into pitching venture capitalists and angels, into the career coaching I've done, where I've helped people to look at the evidence of their background and their strengths and their interests and what gets them into the flow state, and help them figure out this is who you are and how you show up and how you get into flow. And this is how you talk about it in the most compelling story or most persuasive narrative for who you are. So I use the same techniques in coaching people on career reinvention, on responding, in PR, in marketing and communications. So it's informed my work as a writer, clearly, as an entrepreneur, as a lawyer, as a consultant and a coach, and as a speaker, right? I mean, to a fault. I'm trying to get to the point where I speak more off the cuff and I riff and so forth. I'm still often like making bullet points and trying to prepare stuff. And fortunately for your audience, I have not been referring to text while on this call, but
you're very natural. Don't worry, you're very natural.
It's a constant draw with being a writer. Is you're sort of like, well, I'm going to optimize the words, and once those are optimized, it would be a shame not to use them. So then I have to read them, but then they'll see I'm reading, and but I can become really good at reading, so it doesn't sound like I'm reading, because there's nothing worse than a speech where somebody just sounds like they're reading. But there's still something that can be lost there. So I'm actually trying to move away from some of my writerly instincts and get into some more improv, you might say.
Great. Well, you'll have to keep us updated on that. And with that, I think we covered a lot of ground, and I appreciate your time. And thank you for coming on DC Decoded.
Thanks, Sam. Great time.
That's a wrap for this episode of DC Decoded. I want to thank Cameron again for his time. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to DC Decoded on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. If you found this discussion valuable, we'd love it if you left a rating or review. It helps others discover the show. For more on the DC chapter of the Gen Ed Collective, upcoming events, and ways to get involved via collaborations or sponsorships, check out the links in the show description. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 Wednesdays for the next episode.